This week on Cinemaholics, Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson, and James McAvoy return to theaters in Glass. M. Night Shyamalan's follow-up to Split and Unbreakable. We review the film with special guest Chris Evangelista.
I'm baffled that the same guy who made Unbreakable made this movie.
And hey, it is our 100th episode. After our featured review, we're going to be answering listener questions and discussing some of our favorite films of all time.
Because there's something about that film, I remember growing up, that really kind of embodied like the magic of movies.
All that and more is coming up on Cinemaholics. Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. He is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend. He also reviews films for the playlist Comfort Film and many more. First name Will, last name Glashton. I thought that would sound better.
Yeah, it sounded good on paper, but I guess in execution...
Yeah, I do have it written down.
That's fitting, I guess, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Okay, well, Will Ashton, so I can get your name right at least once. And then I am the author of the novel Killer Joy, a book about Pixar called The Pixar Theory, and I write about film for Atom Insider, Relevant Magazine, and The Young Folks. I am John Negroni. We have a special guest this week. He is a staff writer for Slash Film and has contributed to many other great film sites all over the web. Welcome to Cinemaholics for the first time, Chris Evangelista.
Hello. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And where can people find all your writing, whatever else you're up to these days, Chris?
Pretty much slashfilm.com is where I'm almost always at now because I don't have time to do anything else. So go to slashfilm.com, read everything I wrote there, every single thing. Start at the beginning and work your way up.
Sounds like a pretty easy thing to do. Yeah. We shouldn't take any time at all.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can find more episodes of Cinemaholics on atomtickets.com. Write into the show anytime by emailing us. Our email is cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And you can support us directly by becoming one of our monthly patrons on patreon.com/cinemaholics. And on that off topic, we have a new patron. Thank you so much, Steven, for contributing to Cinemaholics. Your contribution will not be ignored and will not be forgotten. Now, really briefly, before we get into our featured review this week, just want to bring up next week, Sundance is going to start. We're pretty excited. Chris, are you going to find yourself at the festival this year?
I am. This will be my first year go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I'll probably see you in one of the lines, and I'll swap tickets with you if you're not happy with what you got. But
right.
I'm looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. And for those of you listening who might be wondering what we're doing next week for our review, we still don't know yet. So we're going to be putting out a patron poll for you guys to help us out on what we're going to do for next week's show, because we just did a last call episode for The Kid Who Would Be King. That's now live. Go check it out. Kid Who Would Be King. Chris, have you seen this one? Or are you planning on checking it out?
You know, I saw like the poster first, like a month or so ago, and I was like, boy, that's probably stupid. But then I found out, it was directed by Joe Cornish. And so that was like, oh, maybe this will be good. And I've heard actually good things about it. I haven't seen it yet. I'll probably wait till Blu-ray or whatever, but I have heard it's good.
Gotcha. Yeah, Will and I and Corey Woodruff talked about it the other day, and we liked it on the whole. I liked it more than you did, Will. I vaguely remember you said you hated it, despised it, and don't recommend it.
Oh,
is that correct?
Man, don't be putting words in my mouth, John. I like the film. I thought it was a little formulaic, but I enjoyed it. Yeah.
All right. It sounds like a solid rental for a lot of folks, and I think it's a great family film. But anyway, that last call is out right now. Be sure to check it out. That's all we got for off topics. I'm ready to get into our only review this week. So our only review for this week, because it is our 100th episode, is Glass. This is the newest film from writer-director M. Night Shyamalan. So in 2000, he released Unbreakable, which was sort of a downbeat deconstruction of the superhero comic book movie genre, long before it reached the craziness of superhero movies that is today. Nonetheless, this film I found was pretty interesting in the way it used comic book mythology to tell a story about depression in a very realistic world. It was like a more serious, dramatic version of Kick-Ass about a decade before that film would come out, and I think it was 8 years before Mark Millar would write the graphic novel. So then in 2017, fast forward, Shyamalan released Split, which ended up being a surprise follow-up to Unbreakable because it exists in the same world. Split was about a serial killer with multiple personalities and one superpowered animalistic persona called the Beast. And the twist in that film was that, spoilers for Split, this Beast character, played by James McAvoy, would be a proper villain for Glass, the movie we're getting right now, against David Dunn, also known as the Green Guard or Overseer. He has a couple of different names. And he's, of course, played once again by Bruce Willis. And sure enough, we now have Glass, which reintroduces the Samuel L. Jackson character from the original film, Unbreakable. Elijah Price, or Glass, however he's describing himself, as the mastermind in between these two forces of good and evil. For a lot of the time in Glass, all three characters are in a mental institution under the care of a psychiatrist, Dr. Staple, played by Sarah Paulson. And we have a brief clip here where she's in her office discussing the three superpowered men with their respective loved ones. David Dunn's son, who I believe is the same actor from the first Unbreakable.
He is.
Elijah Price's mother, same actress. And the Beast's former kidnapping victim, again, same actress from Split. Here is a clip from Glass.
Listen to me, Joseph. Your father is making great progress. I'm very hopeful for him.
Did you know the first Superman couldn't even fly? And Metropolis is actually New York City. And what about all the coincidences in what I was reading?
Comic books are an obsession. Have you ever been to a comic book convention? They sell teen TV shows there. They are selling things. Your friends and family members have lost their perspective. Your dad is trying to fight her abductor. Your son is trying to best his dad. He's the anarchist. He's the brains. He's the reluctant hero. This all sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Comic books are not valid history.
All right, that is from the film Glass, which is now in theaters. So we have a lot to cover with this movie, but start us off, Chris Evangelista. What was your entry point into Glass? Were you a fan of Unbreakable and Split going into this new one?
Yes, I'm a big fan of M. Night Shyamalan in general. I pride myself on being sort of like a stan, as the kids say, of M. Night Shyamalan, where even when most people had turned on him, I was still pretty much all in. I feel like it was around like The Village is where people started to just be like, all right, we've had enough of this guy. And I think The Village is fantastic. And even
I was gonna say, you have a great piece about The Village at Slash Film. I just wanted to shout that out and encourage everyone to read that.
Yes, thanks. And even The Happening, which I acknowledge is a dumb movie, I still like enjoy watching it. So I was happy about he's had this like mini comeback. You know, first there was The Visit, which I liked, and then there was Split, which I really liked. And as for Unbreakable is, I think, his best movie. So I was pretty excited about this when it was announced, and when the trailers came out, all that stuff. So I was looking forward to it.
What did you think then? What did it live up to your? It sounds like you had pretty high expectations.
I did, and man, was I! This is probably the most disappointing movie I've ever seen. I don't know what happened. I don't know what the hell went wrong, and I found this movie to be so bad that it actually made me like have like a existential crisis, in the sense that I was sitting there in a theater and I was like, have I been wrong this whole time? Is M. Night Shyamalan actually a terrible filmmaker like a lot of people claim he is? And have I just been mistaken? Like, what is going on here? I'm baffled that the same guy who made Unbreakable made this movie, because it's almost like he forgot everything he did with Unbreakable to make this. And I don't know why. I was sitting in the theater just being like, why are you doing this to me, M. Night Shyamalan? I felt personally attacked.
All right, so we're going to get into some of those specifics. Very curious to hear what it was about the film that didn't quite work for you. So Will Ashton, I know one of the first times you and I, when we did our prototype episode for Cinemaholics, it was the conversation you and I had that we published on a different podcast right before the first episode of this one 2 years ago. We talked about Split, and I re-listened to that episode. Yeah, you don't act surprised. I told you I did this. And,
no. I was surprised that was 2 years ago. I just
I see. Okay. It doesn't feel all that long ago that Split came out, and famously or infamously, I was not a fan of Split. So I have a kind of a different entry point from you, Chris. But Will, you kind of liked that one a little bit, right? I mean, you definitely had some mixed feelings, but it sounded like on the whole you thought it was a worthwhile experience. So that was your entry point. And then you also said in that show that you had never seen Unbreakable. You have seen Unbreakable for the first time. First of all, what did you think of that one, and how did that affect your experience with Glass?
For sure, yeah. I actually just watched Unbreakable for the first time, I think hours before I saw Glass. I don't know why I held off for so long to see Unbreakable. I really don't know, but I'm so glad I did, because that was really, really good. I should have seen that a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, I think that might be it's between that and Sixth Sense, but I think that might be his best directed film. And I really think that's a showcase of what Shyamalan can do behind the camera. So I was pretty amped up, and I rewatched Split after I saw Glass. So my feelings about the film are still about the same, I think, from that episode that you're talking about. But yeah, Glass. The thing that stuck out to me the most was that, considering how much the film was building up, like it's been almost 20 years, like all this build up and stuff for the sequel to Unbreakable, and all the stuff that's related to Unbreakable feels weirdly kind of half-assed in this movie. It's kind of more of a sequel to Split than Unbreakable, which I guess makes sense considering that Split came out relatively sooner, but I just don't really know, like Chris was saying, what was going through Shyamalan's head as he was making this film. I don't know if just like the anticipation, like just combining these two films together ultimately just made the film rather disjointed, or if he just was kind of just given carte blanche to do what he wanted, and this kind of ultimately what it became. But yeah, I'm similarly disappointed, but I don't know if I'm quite at the same level of disappointed as Chris, so I can certainly understand why you feel that way.
Yeah, I'm definitely disappointed in this one, and I didn't even like Split. But I do agree with both of you that I think Unbreakable, I also think it's probably his best film. I think that one is so well paced. It has a cadence to it that is so interesting and psychological. I like what he's doing with superheroes. He's doing like psychological superhero movies that delve into questions about mythology and the stories we tell each other and interesting ideas about comic books. But I have to agree that I think that when you see Glass, it's almost like none of these ideas crystallize in anything larger than themselves. And like we heard it in that clip. Yeah, right. Well, yeah. Even in that clip, just hearing Anya Taylor-Joy sort of mouth off things about superhero comics, like they're these big revelations, that to me sums up a lot of this movie, a lot of like self-serious, reflection on comic books that just the timing doesn't feel quite right for me. But Chris, getting more specific, I mean, what was it about this one? Were there things in it that did work for you, or was there like a certain moment where things kind of fell apart, or was it just the whole way through it was just not a good experience?
I liked the first like 10 or 15 minutes. I was like, all right, this is pretty good. And I liked James McAvoy's performance for the most part. He's all in here. He's playing all, this character with dissociative identity disorder, and he's essentially playing like 24 different people at once, and he's really good at doing that. Although I feel like it gets to a point where it gets exhausting, where there's literally a scene where he keeps changing personalities every like second, and it got to the point where I was like, all right, stop, I get it, I know what this character is, I don't need to see this anymore. But beyond that, I feel like almost nothing works here. Literally almost nothing. For one thing, Bruce Willis is just phoning it in, and that's something he's been doing a long time now. That's his go-to mode seems to be just sleepwalking. But Shyamalan was able to get really good performances out of him. I mean, his performance in The Sixth Sense might be like one of the best of his career, and he's really good in Unbreakable. And I had hoped that reuniting with Shyamalan, playing that character again, it would wake him up, and that didn't happen. And he's barely in it. Like he ends up getting locked in his cell, and there's like a 45-minute stretch of the movie where they don't even like focus on him. And so that was like, why even make this an Unbreakable follow-up if you don't really want to go back and focus on his character, which was the big point of Unbreakable. And, I don't, there's just so much here. It's going to start sounding like nitpicking if I run down the list, but I'll put it this way. Like this movie, I think it ruins Unbreakable for me. Like every time I rewatch Unbreakable now, I'm going to be like, ugh, I have to remember how this movie ended. And I don't give away spoilers, but it ruins what was so good about I think a lot about the ending of Unbreakable, where not the twist part, but the part where Bruce Willis and his son have that moment where they're at the dinner table, and he gives his son a look where he's like, yes, I am a superhero. And the son looks amazed. And Shyamalan even has like a flashback of that in the end of this movie. And that's such a powerful, poignant moment in Unbreakable. And you contrast it with what happens to David Dunn in this movie. And it's like, oh, like what bullshit. I don't know why you would do that. So yeah, that's where I stand.
I definitely don't understand what they were going for with a lot of the character relationships in general here. I do think David Dunn and his son is still one of the things I like most about this universe. And to what you're saying, we don't get a lot of it. We get some of it in the beginning and then some reference to it over the course of the movie. And then what we're left with is some of Glass, but he doesn't show up much until the third part of the film. And when he does come onto the scene, I want to give this film credit for letting Samuel Jackson just own his part in this, because I do think those are some of my favorite scenes, is when Glass is allowed to be his character, not giving anything away. It's, in the trailer that he becomes more of a presence, and it's the name of the movie. But then you have this one character relationship that is so abysmally bad that I just cannot give this film a pass, is the one between Anya Taylor-Joy's character and the Beast. I don't know if you guys agree with this, but there is something that rings so false to me with this character relationship and their motivations for each other that makes me wonder, did something happen in Split? Was there a deleted scene or something that I don't understand? Because there's some sort of bond between them that I didn't think was there. I don't know, Will, did you pick up on that, or are you going to disagree?
No, I found that kind of weird as well. I think what he was going for is that she connected to Hedwig a little bit, like the child in him, and Kevin as well, that's like kind of trapped inside there. I think that's what he was going for, but it's not really portrayed too well. I agree. It kind of comes out of nowhere. It's just like, this feels more scripted than natural to the story. So I can get behind what you're saying.
I think there's a lot of that where I just don't think some of these characters go well together. There's something about the whole dynamic of Split that, for me, just doesn't connect with the Unbreakable story. It feels like movies sort of colliding instead of sort of meshing well together. And it's a shame, because I really like movies like this where strong personalities are just bouncing off of each other. And you barely get that. You really don't get a lot of good psychological conversations between the Beast and David Dunn, for example. It's really just the Beast and Dr. Staple, and then the Beast and itself and things like that. And I was found kind of wanting with some of that trio sort of being together. They're together, I think, once in the film, and yeah, they didn't quite work for me. But okay, so Sarah Paulson's character, I'm sort of undecided on this one, Chris. This whole angle, and again, we can't give anything away, but this whole thing that they're trying to do, her whole motivation is to try to convince it's gaslighting. They're trying to convince these superpowered people they're not superpowered. I have a feeling you didn't like that, since you said kind of a lot of it fell apart for you, but what was it specifically about this part of the film that didn't work?
So I like this idea a lot, and I feel like this idea would have worked better in Unbreakable, but here we've already had two films where we know, David Dunn has superhuman strength, and the Beast is the Beast. And it's pointless to keep hammering this point home that, oh, they're not who they say they are, because it feels like it's wasting time, because we already know the truth. And it takes up such a huge chunk of the movie that it starts to become tedious, where you're just thinking, we know the truth. When is everyone else going to find out the truth? I don't want to spend this much time being, gaslit, like you said. And, I like Sarah Paulson. I think Sarah Paulson is a phenomenal actress. I don't think she nails this role right. And I think it's not really her fault, because the character is written in this way where, I'm tiptoeing around spoilers here, but she's written in a way where she's not exactly who she says she is. And I think she had trouble trying to find out how to play the character, because she's sort of sympathetic, but she's not. And it didn't work for me. And I was most disappointed about that, because I was excited about her being in the movie, because I like her so much, but her character just never really works.
I'm going to say something a little controversial. I know, Will, you're probably going to be surprised that I'm saying this, but I will say, and something you said kind of reminded me of this, but a lot of the things I usually don't like Shyamalan for are in this film. And I actually didn't mind them as much in this one. So one of the main ones is the sort of expositional clunky dialogue. There were only a few times in Glass where I was kind of annoyed, or I was feeling like I was, giving I was knocking the film down a few points for that sort of thing. And also the POV shots. For whatever reason, and I've complained about this for years with Shyamalan, but in this one, that directing style kind of worked for me. And even though I didn't like it at first, upon thinking more about it, I do kind of like what he was going for with these action scenes and how he filmed it and how he made them feel. It is very awkward and it is sort of unwieldy, and you don't really get the sense that it's a superhero movie. Even though during the film, I was a little bit like, oh, this is weird. Afterward, I think I liked it a little bit more. What do you think, Will? Am I nuts?
Yeah, I mean, I can get what you're saying about exposition as films. It can be a little heavy-handed and clunky, but I never really had an issue with his POV shots, to be fair. I usually kind of find them kind of effective, but yeah, I really usually for me it's just like some of his dialogue can be what bothers me, and there's a couple scenes in this where I found that to be kind of tedious, particularly the scene with Shyamalan himself in it, where he took a whole segment of the film to be like, I'm gonna tie my cameos together. This is what I've been up to, and he gives his little cameo an arc. Which I don't know.
I chuckled. I did chuckle at that.
There's a part of me that kind of respects that. Shyamalan is just like, I'm just gonna do this because I want to. But at the same time, it's just like kind of like what Chris was saying. It's just this movie feels like it stalls a lot. Like it just kind of feels like it's like in a series of rendering. Like it just constantly just kind of spinning its circle, like getting to the thing that it wants to get to, which is basically the ending. Which, I mean, I will say that when, without giving anything away, when McAvoy and Samuel Jackson kind of get together, there was like that thrill for me where it's like, okay, here we go. Like, this is where it's going to get like what I'm looking for. And I think it starts kind of fun. And I do like that the climax is where it is. Like, I do like that kind of sets itself up to be like something else, and it ultimately is restrained. But ultimately, yeah, I find myself kind of wanting with this film, and I'm glad I'm not alone in that regard.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone at all. And at the same time, we haven't mentioned this, but there are some outliers, and I've found some critics and some film people who I deeply respect who do connect with this film and consider it worth your time and really enjoyed it. I don't understand where they're coming from, but giving them sort of the benefit of the doubt, I do think that this film's going to work for some people and for some audiences, but it is the typical Shyamalan where you really don't know how it's going to sit with you unless you give it a shot. I think if you're at least mildly interested in what this is, if you liked Unbreakable, I don't think, unlike Split, I don't think it's a film that like it didn't provoke a very extreme reaction out of me. I just sort of walked out of Glass rolling my eyes. Split, I was genuinely pretty angry at how much I disliked that film, even though I know a lot of people really liked it. This one, I think, actually is worth checking out just to see for that chance that you might be one of the ones who really likes it. And I think that is a good reason to give it a shot. And it's a big hit so far. So far it's made, let's see, $40.5 million domestically off of a $20 million budget. Worldwide, it's at 89, and that's not counting Saturday totals yet, or Sunday totals, I should say. So definitely a hit for Shyamalan, and his mini comeback, as you were alluding to, Chris, is in full steam. I hope that he gets out of this trilogy now, the East Trail 177 trilogy, as a lot of people like to call it, and does something kind of new. But, we've seen him do new things before, and so I say that cautiously. But let's get into our final thoughts and grade this thing. Chris, if you could sum up this film, really through that perspective of should people seek it out? And if they do, what should they expect? And what's your overall grade?
I would say no, ignore this movie, but I know that's not going to happen. And I know people are going to, the curiosity factor is going to check in. Yeah. I wish I could say I liked it. I wish I could even say, it was bad, but I sort of enjoyed some things, but I can't even get on that level. And I'm, like I said at the start of the show, I'm someone who loves Shyamalan, and I'm glad it was a hit, even though I don't like the movie, because I want him to keep making movies and I do want him to bounce back and do something better. But this is of all of his movies that I've seen, I've actually never seen The Last Airbender or that After Earth movie. I did not see either of those. But of all the other, but I have seen all his other movies, and of all his other movies I have seen, this is the one I like the least. I even think Lady in the Water, which up till now was my least favorite film of his, is better than this. So make of that what you will. If I had to give it a letter, do you do letter grades or stars? I don't know. I'm sorry.
You can we usually use letter grades, but you can use whatever you want.
All right. I would probably give it, I don't want to say F because F is like the plague. So I'm going to say D, maybe D minus. So there's some things you might like, the performances. Samuel L. Jackson is very good when he finally shows up. And I do actually think the fight scenes, like you were saying, are enjoyable. I like how brutal they seem, and they don't seem choreographed. It's literally Bruce Willis like slamming people into walls. And I liked that. But beyond that, this was a major, major disappointment for me.
All right. And I forgot to mention too, this is 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. So most critics aren't really liking it, but the few that do are giving it some praise. The audience score, which, that's kind of a tougher thing to quantify, is higher. It's like a 78%. So it's a mystery. You really don't know what you're going to think of this one unless you give it a shot. But Will Ashton, what say you?
Never in all my days did I expect to be slightly more positive on an M. Night Shyamalan movie than Chris, but I ultimately didn't like the film, but I think I kind of respect Shyamalan for making the movie he wanted to make, even though I imagine most people are not going to be satisfied by this. I don't think anyone really is going to be like, oh, well, that's exactly what I wanted from these characters. I feel like it's a movie only for Shyamalan, and I mean, I'm glad he made the movie he wanted to make, but I just wish I enjoyed it better. But yeah, I mean, there's something here I like. I like the production design. I like the last scene. And I do think the performances from Samuel L. Jackson and McAvoy are good. So I'm between a C plus and a C. I'll give it a C just because of my ultimate disappointment in the film, but I can't say I ultimately hated it.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because I think I gave Split a C, and I'm going to give this one a C. I do think it's like right in the middle of, I think it's going to get some very negative reactions from people, which I dread. And then it's going to get some positive ones because there are good things in here. I do want something like this to be successful, kind of to what Chris was saying before, because it is a more cerebral take on this subject matter. And I want more of that. It really isn't the what with this movie. It's not the ideas in them. I get what the ideas are. I get what Shyamalan is trying to do. I just really think it's the execution that feels sloppy and mishandled, just in my perspective. And I think that you can do a movie like this with the budget it has really well, because we've seen that with Unbreakable. And I'm pretty disappointed as well. I'm feeling less annoyed with the movie as time goes on, to be totally honest. I think the plot holes were really just grating on me during the movie. There were just things that people were so dumb in this movie. I mean, that's a simple way to say it. And I don't like watching films where I feel a lot smarter than the people in the movie. I'm not smart enough to want to feel like that. I don't want people to be doing things that, like, everything from the security of this mental institution to their methods of keeping people contained were just weird. And they raised more questions than anything else. And I couldn't enjoy this film because of it, because it just kept its world building kept throwing me off. And that's a big reason why I just can't get into it. But I think if you can get sucked into the world building and sort of look past and overlook some of the weird contrivances, you might have a good time with this one. And as it's turning out, it looks like some people really are. So that's Glass. And I guess we'll see over time if this one's going to have a shelf life. I guess if you're Chris, you hope it doesn't, but we'll see what happens. But that is our review of Glass. Chris, thanks so much for coming on and talking shop. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move on, we did ask you, the listeners, what you thought of Glass. We asked you to send your tweet size reviews to Cinemaholics Pod on Twitter. And here's what some of you had to say. I like this one from Chet. Chet had a very nice one-liner for Glass. His review is "break in case of mediocrity." which I enjoyed. I mine was a little bit more mean. My one-liner review of this film was mental hell, and I stand by it.
Yeah, mine was. I actually had one word review for it as well. I just said disjointed. That was my
I like
opinion of it. That's just how I felt after. Like, what do you think? It was disjointed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The end. But my thing with the mental hell was just it, because we didn't really get into this, but the whole what this film does with like mental health tropes and just those easy cliches of how scary, split personality is and what it does.
Yeah.
I still don't like that from Split. I obviously don't like it again here in this one, but we don't have to belabor it.
Right. I mean, I won't go on this too far. I will say though that I think at least Split, I mean, you can criticize the film in this regard, and I think it's fair, but I do think that movie at least takes some time to be like, all right, this is a fantasy. Like, please research DID and like you can find real facts about this. This movie doesn't do that at all, so I have to be critical of that. But I do think Split does that. So I'm a little more favorable in that regard for Split, but I still think the criticisms are valid.
All right. And then Twitter user Jonathan sent us his tweet size review and said, it's a tragedy that the entire film is almost ruined by the awkwardly stumbling closing act. But M. Night Shyamalan somehow still gets his final say with a touching message about the letting your hero cape fly proudly. Wait, is this a metaphor for Shyamalan's career? I like that because I think it was Movie Bob on his YouTube channel sort of did this wonderful sort of comparison between M. Night Shyamalan's career and how he's using these films to sort of talk directly to film critics. And I think it's kind of funny, and you should check that out. It's in his Glass review that's out on YouTube.
I mean, what hasn't he said about critics that he didn't say in Lady in the Water?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was pretty on the nose in that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then last we have from Brian. His tweet size review is, at times I wished I was blowing glass instead of watching it. Love it.
Oh, wow.
A slow build up to a letdown for its big reveal. Those not into comics at all may actually hate this film. But James McAvoy is amazing, and his incredible talents owned this performance. That is Brian, and he wanted a plug from the Take Two podcast.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. And I don't like the James McAvoy performance. I kind of forgot to mention this. I don't hate it either. I appreciate it and I respect it because there's talent. Like Matt McAvoy's a fantastic actor, but I don't like the character and I don't like the beast and I don't like what he's doing, but I do like how he's doing it. If that makes any sense. I don't know.
Sorta, yeah.
It's weird.
I think in Split, it's honestly an amazing performance. This film, I think it's good. I don't think it's quite on par, but I think that's more with the writing. But maybe, I don't know. I maybe also the fact that the with Split, I noticed rewatching it that it's better at like distinguishing the different personalities through costumes. In this movie, he's like only allowed to wear like one thing or like less than one thing for most of the movie. So like it's a little like he has to do more, and maybe that makes the performance harder for him to do. But I still vouch for his performance in Split.
I do like the foreshadowing with an Unbreakable. You have Bruce Willis with like the green clothes, and then the Beast has the yellow clothes. That's pretty cool. But I think purple, we agree. Yeah. I think we agree more than we disagree. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Will Ashton, this is our 100th episode of Cinemaholics. How do you feel about this? It feels pretty good.
It's weird. Yeah, I don't know if I ever expected to be a part of 100 episodes of anything. And it's surprising. It just feels like, oh yeah, like we have accomplished quite a lot in the past 2 years, haven't we, John?
I hope so. But I mean, does it feel like it to you? Like, does it feel like we've come a long way with this, or has it been quick for you? Like, oh, it feels like just yesterday we were talking about John Wick Chapter 2 and Lego Batman.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really feel surprising that it's 100 episodes, only in the sense that like we've done a lot of like last calls and spin-offs and stuff like that.
Well,
so I can understand.
This doesn't count any of those.
I know, yeah, but it feels like it certainly feels like we've done 100 episodes at this point. But it doesn't feel like 2 years. That's what surprises me. Like we were saying earlier, like it doesn't feel like 2 years yet. That part of it feels like it's flying fast for me.
Yeah. So to be specific, so we've done about 130 productions. We've put out like 130 things on this feed for the podcast listeners, and even more stuff on YouTube. But the main show, to be more definitive, is our weekly review. A featured review that we do every single week. And I didn't go through it, Will, but I'm pretty sure the last 2 years we haven't missed like a single episode. Like we've always put out something. The only times when we didn't put out something that was kind of like the traditional shows, we were putting out like a pre-recorded bonus episode, but it was still the same kind of deal. Yeah. Where I think you and Matt talked about something over the holidays because I was gone and stuff like that. And even then it was like once or twice, but this is like 100 straight on episodes where we're getting together and we're talking about film.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like we never had like a 2-week lull or something. Like we haven't always been in every episode, but we've been pretty good about producing content in a weekly fashion, at least, I think. So
yeah,
that's an accomplishment for sure.
There are very few episodes that you haven't been on. I think you've only missed maybe 2 episodes ever.
No, it's more than that. It's probably
Really?
5. I think it's 5 or 6.
That I have a hard time. I can't remember any of those episodes because, well, it just always feels like you're at my side.
Yeah, I can remember some of them. It was like Isle of Dogs. I wasn't. Obviously, Ocean's 8. I wasn't.
That's right. That's right.
Lost City of Z, Ghost in the Shell.
So it's a lot of our early stuff. Where were you?
Right. And then I don't know. And there was something else, but I'm blanking on what it is. But it's they're few and far between, I think. And same with you. I think you've only missed like the Happy Time Murders episode and something else, right?
No, I was there for Happy Time Murders because it was me and Maverick and you, and Maverick and I were just.
No, that was the next episode because it was Matt and Chris and I
right.
for the main episode, right?
Yeah, you kind of owned that conversation because of the Muppets connection, and yeah. Then Maverick and I caught up the week after. That was rough. That was a rough conversation. Yeah, the only times I've missed were like that the Ladies' Night Ocean's 8 episode. Right. That was also Hereditary. And then I missed the Downsizing and Bright conversation because it was the holidays. I think that's it for me. So it's probably just 3 episodes.
Yeah. And then a couple last calls, but I mean, that's not main episode. Right.
Yeah. I didn't want to be on those anyway. I'm glad I didn't get the invite.
Oh, man.
Well, it's been a really cool ride. We're obviously still planning to do 100 more at the very least. I love doing this show, Will, and I was thinking about this in preparation of we're going to answer, of course, some questions from listeners and talk more about stuff that you want to hear, not just us rambling about the old days.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, like, I love doing this show. I don't say it enough because I love how this podcast kind of forces us to watch films that weren't on our radar. Because when it's like the same thing when you have to do a review for a film. If you're doing a review, like a written review, you got to see the film and every week you got to hit a deadline. You got to do it. And my favorite thing about a lot of film podcasts, not just ours, and the reason that I listen to a lot is because that discovery factor is fantastic. And I love going to a theater, and because I know we're going to talk about it on the show, or because I want to do it as a mini review and I have an opportunity to see something that maybe you aren't able to see or Maverick wasn't able to see, I can just watch it. And those have been my favorite moments of the show when I've been able to come on and be like, I saw this and I gave it a shot and it was such a great surprise. And I loved it. And I can think of a few films like that. One of my favorite moments of this show, in fact, was probably when I dragged Maverick to Lady Macbeth, forced him to watch that film. I had not seen it. I hadn't seen a trailer, but I just wanted him to watch an indie film with me because we had an afternoon and we both really came away from it really liking it. And that was a cool moment because Maverick had that discovery. I think that was genuinely like the first time a movie really surprised him and like in the theater. So moments like that are why I love this show. And I don't know, what about you, Will? I mean, if not that sort of surprise factor, is there a reason like you still keep coming on and you keep tolerating my BS?
Oh, man. Well, first I want to say, I mean, before we forget, I want to extend, I know he's not listening, but Maverick, thank you for, joining us on this adventure as well. I mean, I think that's important, to extend our thank yous to him as well. But
for those who don't know, he moved to Seattle. I miss him so much. And I know he's not listening, so I can just say it. I just miss him. He's such a wonderful person, such a joy to be around. I love talking about movies with him. And you're dearly missed, Maverick. I would text this to you, but I just don't want you to have the satisfaction of me missing you.
Yeah, I like to think he is listening, and like a single tear is strolling down his eye.
He'll never admit it.
Yeah, he won't admit it, but I think that's what's happening.
Yeah,
but we'll never know. Maybe. But no, to answer your question, for me, it's always about the conversation. That's what I always enjoy, or more specifically, the interaction. Like not only with you and Maverick and all of our guests, but just with our fans. I mean, I really love when we can just kind of have a group discussion about a film, just kind of process a piece of art, if you will, like just kind of getting the genesis of like what is this thing, and just kind of accepting whether it's good or bad or how we feel about something. To me, it's always the conversation that I value the most.
We've had some good ones. My favorite conversations you and I have been the strict disagreements. And
right. No, same here.
In preparation for this, I did go through and I read some of our Apple Podcast reviews. A lot of them I hadn't read in a while, and some that I had never seen before. And I think that is something that I guess has stuck out for people, because I saw a lot of that. You and I are able to just be pretty honest about our takes and not let the other person step all over our opinions. And I appreciate that, Will, because I think that there are a lot of times when I just think you're wrong. But no, I'm joking, of course.
Yeah. No, obviously we be fair. Yeah. I mean, that's completely valid. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I very, very rarely think you're actually wrong. I think it's so rare, it's insane. But because I think you're very knowledgeable on film, and I think that it's so subjective that you can't put that on somebody. But what I appreciate is that, and this goes to a lot of people we've had on the show, basically everyone who's been on Cinemaholics, is there's always this investigative spirit with disagreement of like, okay, so why are you feeling that way about this film? And that's where the conversation comes to life for me, because even if we don't walk away from it agreeing, I feel like I understand you as a person better. And I think the listeners understand us better, because we are able to sort of give our case and just frankly reveal more about ourselves through our film reviews. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes we exaggerate, but I think we're always pretty good about respecting everyone's opinions. Like very rarely, I think, if we ever like devolved into like cussing or like chewing somebody out in like a unpolite or unprofessional way. I think even if we strongly disagree with somebody, I think we're pretty good about being like, okay, well, I at least want to understand where you're coming from, or okay, I can see why you feel this way about something. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Okay, we have a lot of questions and emails to get to. We're going to narrow it down, and we're sorry if we don't get to something that you submitted. We asked you last week to write in with anything that's on your mind with this show that you want us to talk about, and any recommendations that you want us to put out, whatever is the case. And the first thing we got was an email from one of our new patrons, Paul. So Paul said, "Hi guys, thanks for the mention on this week's show and your previous messages on Twitter at CinemaHolicsPod, for those of you listening. I absolutely love the show, the fact that you don't all have the same opinions, and your honesty. Your show now feeds what movies and TV shows I invest my time in. I don't always agree, but that's the beauty of the whole cinematic experience. It's your own personal opinion that counts. One of the major problems I have living in England is that release dates differ to you guys. Our releases seem to be really limited unless you live in London, and our streaming services, including Netflix, are not as diverse as yours. I would love for you guys to have drinks and really go to town on the movies that you're passionate about. It seems that you have great diversity in your tastes, and that's what makes both the chemistry between you and the show so entertaining. I mention movies to friends and acquaintances that they've never heard of, but I'm sure you will know them, movies that I unashamedly enjoy. I was listening to an older show the other day, and one of you mentioned what John Wayne movies to watch and which order to watch them. I'd love to know what they were. Anyway, keep up the amazing work that you do. Regards." Thank you for your email, Paul. A lot of great stuff in there. Let's address it one by one. So we kind of alluded to the whole thing about, the disagreements and all of that. And I forgot to mention this too, Will. Like, it does kind of go into our name, Cinemaholics. Like, the whole point of this show, and we don't always bring it up, but the sort of impetus for this was to sort of bridge the divide between your typical traditional film critic and your film lover, and just somebody who's like a more casual fan who doesn't take films quite as seriously as us, but still appreciates film and likes to go to the theater, and sort of just creating a community of people who can sort of interact with each other. It doesn't matter if you've seen thousands of films or a couple in your lifetime. Like, we don't want this to be an exclusionary place where we condescend to you or make you feel like you're wrong about something. That is what the point of Cinemaholics is we're all Cinemaholics. We're not, not all of us are the typical casual moviegoer. Not all of us are the typical film critic. And some of us aren't crazy film buffs. There are people who listen to this show who've seen far more movies than I have. I know that's for a fact. But the point is that we can sort of be on the same ground, common ground between people who want to talk about film. That's the point of the show. So I appreciate that aspect as well. And I don't know, does Cinemaholics mean anything different to you, Will?
No, that's pretty much, I think, what the definition is. There is a strict definition to the term Cinemaholics, but yeah, it's just that community, that sense of everyone here just really likes film, even if we haven't all seen the same number of films or haven't studied film in the same high regard. So yeah, it's that community that I think is really important for us.
We don't always do a great job of not shaming each other. Sometimes I get a little annoyed with you, Will, for things you haven't seen, and I think you can say the other way around. But that's why we have respective lists of films that I want you to see and ones that you want me to see, and I appreciate that that accountability that we bring to the show. Anyway, so regarding Paul's comment about release dates, I'd like to get better about this of, really mentioning what and when things are coming out, because we have a lot of listeners from other countries and we fall into this trap of being very American centric. And I don't think that's right, because a lot of people listening don't, these films aren't coming out at the same time. We obviously can't just give out a bunch of information, but I think, we can probably do a better job of being more specific when we talk about releases and what's coming out. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I can't fault us for when a movie comes out in our area, but I do agree that I think to be more inclusive to everyone who listens to the show, that would be a good thing. For sure. And also, Paul wants us to have drinks and go to town on the movies you're passionate about. So we did something like this. Yeah, you're coughing already just thinking about the hangover. Oh boy. But I had drinks when we talked about The Kid Who Would Be King. I think that was a very passionate conversation. We could do something a little bit more, like we've talked about this before, doing like a drunk episode, which would be fun, like straight on drunk, not just having a drink or two. But Will, are you still up for something like that? What should we talk about? Yeah, I'm down. I mean, we've kind of done something similar, I think, in the past. Did we do that with the Q&A episode?
Yeah, we did. It was unofficial.
A little bit. Yeah. At least I'll speak for myself. I think that's probably the most tipsy I've been on the show, but
I refuse to listen to that episode because of how embarrassed I
listened to the whole thing. I know it got pretty feisty, but no, I'd be totally down for sure.
Well, drink responsibly. Obviously, we don't condone reckless drinking. I got to put that in there because it's important.
And if you're of age and all that stuff.
Exactly. Thank you, Will. And depending on the country you're in, I know that the ages are different depending on where you go.
Yeah,
anyway. Okay. And then, there was something that Paul mentioned about John Wayne movies. And so when we read this email, I knew I had heard this before, but I didn't think you had said it, Will. And so we did a little investigation. And actually, this was on one of our spin-off episodes or spin-off podcasts. Anyway, That's All I Got, hosted by Sam Noland. He talked about this with Anthony Battaglia. Battaglia was the one who said that these John Wayne movies that he would watch in a certain order. Unfortunately, Paul, we still got to find out what they were, and we'd have to reach out to Anthony directly about that. If you want to follow Anthony, he has a Letterboxd account. Again, his name is Anthony Battaglia. You can find him. His profile is like the Death Star. A-Tag isn't still going. We got a couple questions about that. What happened to Anyway, That's All I Got. Basically, they just kind of finished. They did a lot of episodes, a lot of content. And Sam's a very busy film student, and he's taking a bit of a break. He wants to get back into podcasting. We talk all the time. We love having him on the show. On this show, we're going to have him on for an episode coming up, actually. And yeah, just taking a break, and he's still kind of getting into his rhythm of how he wants to turn film into a career. So we really appreciate what those guys did. They did so many great episodes. It's a fantastic catalog, and it feels like a great series. And hopefully it can come back someday with maybe some new ideas and some new spin on that, what they were going for there. It was really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thanks again, Paul. We got another email from Jesse. Jesse said, "Hey guys, congratulations on 100 episodes. That's a seriously amazing achievement, and I'm happy to say I've been listening for over 50 of those episodes." So, well, I'm not sure what 50 episodes was ago. I think that's probably around Black Panther. That was right when season 2 of the show started. So
right, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but I mean, I do know a lot of people came on through our Coco episode. Or maybe even our Last Jedi episode. So I try it. I don't know. I know like certain episodes drew people in, but I don't know exactly what 50 episodes was. So
yeah, I would say, Will, actually mid 90s was probably our that's where everybody came on.
oh,
Anyway,
wow, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess if a lot of people listen to episode.
That's right. Anyway, so Jesse went on to say, last week you touched on a little bit about some of your biggest episodes in 2018. So I'm curious what your favorite episodes or movies you've talked about have been since you started Cinemaholics. And are there any movies you feel like you were wrong about? Thanks for making such a great show. Will, I made a list for you for the films you were wrong about. I'm just joking, obviously.
Okay.
Favorite episodes or movies we've talked about. I would say our Last Jedi episode is one of my favorite episodes we've ever done.
Yeah,
I absolutely love
too,
that conversation.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I also really like that episode we did last week with Corey Woodruff on The Kid Who Would Be King. I told you right after we recorded, I told Corey, I just thought that was such a great conversation. I know you really enjoyed the Vice conversation we had recently.
Yeah, I thought that was really good.
I've always had a kick with the Belko experiment. It was like our last call I think we ever did, and it was just me and Maverick. That was really fun. What about you?
Pop-Tart tobacco.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, going off what you said, Last Jedi, Vice, it wasn't a main episode, but I do remember really enjoying our conversation on Assassination Nation. I thought that was really good. Let's see, what else have we done? I'm trying to think. I mean, there's always certain episodes like Coco. I think, like I mentioned before, that's a really strong one. I believe.
Yeah, we had Matt Donato on that one, and
yeah.
I really like some of our like last calls. Like so the ones that come to mind are the ones that we've had guests on. Well, because as much as I love talking about film with you and Maverick, I always love getting on like a different perspective than what we're used to. So the happy hour that I did with TJ Wolsis about is Pixar in decline. That's always really stuck out to me. And yeah, that one actually made its way to a few radio stations, and because we put it out there in the public exchange, and that was just such a substantial, it was such a substance-based conversation about two people who just love Pixar, me and TJ. That was really fun. And then I love the conversation I had with Alicia about James Gunn and the future of Guardians of the Galaxy. And obviously, like we want to have Alicia on the show as much as possible. Hopefully we can keep doing that. But Alicia Grosso, wonderful person, wonderful cinemaholic. I was going to say, like, person who's been on the show at this point, she's like one of our senior contributors if we ever had one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, going off of that, I mean, I think the aforementioned like Happy Time Murders and Welcome to Marwen and Downsizing Conversations. Yeah. I think having Matt on is always fun. You know, I always like talking to Matt, and I hold a special place in my heart for having those episodes in our feed. Also, I really enjoyed our Ready Player One conversation. I thought that one was really solid. I felt we had I
haven't listened to it in a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it in a while either, but I felt like we approached the film in a way that wasn't quite as negative as a lot of people were, but not quite as positive. I thought it was a good in between where we also approached the book in a way that wasn't completely critical of that or completely favorable. I thought it was a good balance. I thought that was a good episode.
Interesting. I might have to recheck that one out. And I think probably my least favorite episode we've ever done, honestly, is our Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm not proud of how that went down. Like, I just don't think that was... I would say least favorite. I just feel like the way that we argued in that one, like you and me and Maverick, and I think a lot of it was my fault. I like re-listening to that episode. I think that I was way too defensive, and that was a low point for me where I was like, you know what, I shouldn't have been so dismissive of some of what are valid complaints about that film. And not that I really loved it or anything. I wasn't like over the moon with Bohemian Rhapsody, but I think that some of the valid criticisms I thought, I could have done a much better job arguing my side or my perspective.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a least favorite. I remember being a little underwhelmed by our It conversation, but I think that was just because that was due to factors outside of our control. So
that was my fault too, because that came during one of the most hardest, darkest moments of my life. Was
right, which is
like the day before.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't blame anything. I just remember feeling like I kind of wish we got a bigger chance to talk about that film. But like I said, given the circumstances, you can't really.
Sorry, my trauma got in the way of your conversation, Will Ashton.
But I'm just thinking, like, that's the only time I feel like I've ever been like underwhelmed by anything. But yeah.
What films were you wrong about, Will? Besides Get Out?
Was I wrong? I gave that a B+, right?
I don't think so. I think you were lower on that one. I don't know. Maybe you gave it a B plus.
A B or a B plus.
I think it was a B, but yeah, I just remember. I just remember not liking your criticisms of that one and just being.
That's fair. Yeah, I do think that's a film where the more I thought about that film, I feel like I've appreciated it more and more. And I haven't seen it again, so I can't say my opinion has changed. But I do want to rewatch it, especially before Us is coming out, because that looks really good. And I think it's valid. I think even though like I didn't dislike the film by any means, but I do think I was unnecessarily critical of some things about that film. And I think that movie is really going to stand the test of time. So, and I'm really happy for Jordan as a filmmaker.
I'm not going to say that I was wrong about Happy Death Day. I maintain that is a bad film that doesn't know it's bad. But I agree. I may have underplayed how much I really enjoyed it. And I remember in that episode, I loved watching that movie. I don't know. That is the kind of film that I want to revisit, and I'm excited about the sequel. But because it's just such a schlocky bad movie, and I know we're never going to agree on this. I had to bring it up. You know this.
Yeah. Well, our fan club, we meet on Wednesdays, and you're always welcome to come by. Just make sure you bring the brownies, and we'll talk about it then.
That's right.
But I would say for me, the one film where I was like looking back on, I think that was too favorable was The Disaster Artist. And I don't think that's a bad film per se, but I feel like I was really high on the film at the time. But especially upon reflection, this not even necessarily with James Franco, some things have come out against him, but just I think as a film, it's not really that memorable or that as strong as I think I was making it in the episode. So that's one where I feel like I was probably wrong on that.
I have a couple. I think I would go a little bit lower on John Wick Chapter 2. I think I was like an A- on that film, and I think I'd be more of a B+, revisiting them. I think that it still is a great experience, but I think that I was a little bit too over the moon with it. I'd say 3 Billboards as well. I'd go a little bit lower just because I think that film had like the opposite of cultural relevance, clearly. And I think Battle of the Sexes, that was a movie I really, really liked when I saw it. It really hit me in a certain way. And I think that I made it out to be something that it wasn't. And I know that like a lot of people were just like, whatever. I still think it's underseen. I think people should give it a shot and that it's worth checking out. But yeah, I would go a bit lower on that one as well. Probably the most dramatically of all of this. And I was wrong. This is a different sort of tweak on the question. I think I was wrong when the trailers for Can You Ever Forgive Me came out. I kind of dismissed it. I thought it looked pretty mediocre. And, the same thing goes with Game Night. Like, I feel like I could have praised Game Night a lot more when we talked about that one, because I really liked it and I felt kind of weird for liking it so much and I didn't want to go over the board. So like the extremes, it goes in like both directions. And that's why it's fun to talk about these after some time has passed and our perspective can be a little bit more nuanced, I guess. So,
that's the beauty of film, right? Because like films are, typically, unless like George Lucas goes in and changes Star Wars, the original cut, most of the time movies are exactly the same, right? They don't change, but people change. Like we evolve, we change in so many different ways. And you just have different perspectives on things. You just kind of evolve as a character. And I think that's one of the beauties of film conversations, that a lot of films like I really like one of my favorite movies. I remember when I saw it, I was like, it was okay. It wasn't great. And then like the more I thought about it and the more I watched it, I'm like, this is one of my favorite movies now. So that just happens, things change.
That's a great segue into this sort of question. It's a question, but it's phrased in a statement from Tyler on Twitter. Tyler's my editor at Relevant Magazine, and he said, I'm really curious how y'all feel your taste in movies has changed since you started the show. That y'all comes courtesy of Tyler living in Florida at the moment. But our taste in movies, this was a tough question for me because on the one hand, I think it's kind of the same. Like, I don't think my taste in movies has changed, but I do think my opinions on filmmaking have changed a little bit in 2 years. I think I'm much less quick to really trash a film than I probably was 2-3 years ago. I think like if I really didn't like something, I'd be really quick to just really hate on it and have fun hating on it. You shared an article with me that kind of got into this from The Ringer, where it was like sort of the art of hating a film or something like that. Where it was really about how we get a lot of satisfaction sometimes out of just really hating something. And I think that I've come to really respect filmmaking on a different level, maybe a deeper level, where I really do. I don't want to dismiss the hard work that people put into films, and I don't want to treat them like this, they live or die by like one person, usually the director, because I just don't think that that is a fair way to analyze a piece of art in this form, because it's not a painting done by one person. It is an enterprise. And there are a lot of ways to look at it financially, creatively, structurally. And I think all of those things are worth bringing up and delving into in place of just very knee-jerk primal reactions to films that don't hold up over time. They don't age well. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I've changed completely in 2 years, but I do think with each day, I always try to be a little more empathetic, a little more understanding. I just try to go into more things open-minded and more considerate. And I think that's the same with film. Like, I think every day I just try to come into things with a greater understanding of what people are trying to do and trying to understand what things are trying to accomplish on their own terms. And so I would say if I change, I just try to be more considerate and understanding in that regard.
All right. I guess to really more directly answer the question, taste-wise, I think I'm liking the really schlocky B horror films a little bit more than I did a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think like a movie like Hellfest, I would have absolutely despised a couple of years ago. But because of films like Happy Death Day and some of the more cerebral horror films like Hereditary, I feel like I have a more firm place for these like off the wall films. And I have liked them for a long time. I mean, Tucker and Dale versus Evil was a very formative film for me. But I think that I think I'm understanding like what these films are really going for more than I used to. And I think a lot of that is because of you, Will, because of the way that you articulate your tastes in those types of films and what you get out of them. So I appreciate that, actually.
Oh, thanks, John.
All right. So Shailesh wants to know, what are our favorite movies of all time? That is too much movie for us to get into. So
Wow.
I was gonna proposition to you, Will, we just choose one of our all-time favorites and gush over one of them briefly. What's your first one?
Well, actually, I just wanted to say real quick, the movie I was referring to earlier was Punk Junk Love. So if you're wondering what that film was. But for me, my favorite film is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It has nothing to do with my name. I just feel like...
Your name's Charlie?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how you found out after all this time. No, I think for me, I don't know how you grade favorite films, but for me, it's always not the best films I've ever seen, or not like the greatest or most like impactful even. For me, it's like my happy place films are usually my favorite. It's like the films that if I was on a desert island and I could only watch one movie for the rest of my time there just by myself, what would be the movie I'd pick, or what would be the most likely films I'd pick in that regard? And for me, it's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, just because there's something about that film I remember growing up that really kind of embodied like the magic of movies. And that's not to say it did it better than another film, or like better than like Mary Poppins or something, for instance. But I feel like that movie just like, it's so naturally whimsical, and I just love Gene Wilder's performance in that so much. I just really love the heart and enthusiasm and warmth of that film. And if I had to pick a favorite, that's probably it.
I love Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I think for a lot of people, that's their favorite film in the same way the generation before Wizard of Oz was a lot of people's favorites, in terms
Another
of
one of my favorites.
Movie magic. Yeah, that movie magic quality for sure. For me, it's one that some people might know already. My favorite movie of all time is The Mask of Zorro. Although that always coincides with, sometimes I go between that film and The Apartment, the Billy Wilder film. Two completely different films. But I'd say if you really want to understand me as a person, that's kind of how I quantify my favorite films, is my relatability with them, or how they really tap into my psyche. And both of those films are in that case. In the case of The Apartment, it's because of the way Jack Lemmon's character really perceives the world, and how he deals with bullies, how he deals with love, and how his character arc, his journey in that, and his growth and empathy for Shirley MacLaine is one of my favorite character relationships. I just think it's honest, and it's funny, and it's sort of realistic, but in that movie way, I guess is the one way to put it. And then Mask of Zorro to me is like, because my favorite genre tends to be the swashbuckling action. That's why I really love Pirates of the Caribbean. But I think the Mask of Zorro is like the best of all of that swashbuckling action from all of the classic Zorro films. Mark of Zorro is one of my favorite films of all time. And I think Mask of Zorro tops it just barely. It doesn't have a better like sword fight, but it is like the culmination of everything that I love about that heroic archetype, the archetype of like, your Batman, your Scarlet Pimpernel, the hero. And it's funny, we're talking about this in the same episode of Glass, right? But Zorro to me, that story, it's so structurally sound. The revenge factor, what it takes to put people before your personal vendettas, and the complication of villains. It's such a great villain in that film who isn't just he looks like a cartoonish villain with like the mustache, but he's complicated and he has connections to characters that you sympathize with. And it's just one of those sweeping romantic action films that really sums up my taste in film. And it really bums me out that we don't get films like Mask of Zorro and Princess Bride and stuff as consistently as we used to. We really don't. Yep. My favorite genre is one that very rarely gets made. And it's a bummer for me.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen Mask of Zorro in a long time, but I do remember liking that film. I should give it a revisit. How do you feel about Legend of Zorro, though?
That's okay. It's not good. It's trying to like, relive a spark, but by just bashing a rock against another rock. It just doesn't have the precision and the love of old fashioned movies that Mask of Zorro has. Because you remember Mask of Zorro, like that film, the practical effects in that film, the matte paintings, it really is merging old cinema with modern cinema in a very unique way. It's one of the reasons it comes to the top of my favorite films, because its perfect blend of everything cinema is as a century comes into fruition in that movie, in my opinion. And Legend of Zorro is just, it feels like a knockoff. It has the same actors doing the same characters, but it doesn't have that same spirit. And I don't know if it's Martin Campbell. My favorite film comes from the guy who directed Green Lantern. Go figure. Yeah. He also did GoldenEye, and he also did Casino Royale. So that should tell you something.
He's so inconsistent.
I'd say he's more hit than miss, but just barely. All right. So those were just a couple of our favorite movies of all time. We could seriously go on all day talking about films like that.
Sure.
And we didn't even get to Shrek. But anyway, so just dropping that bomb.
That's another film. I was going to bring that up. Like Shrek is a film I didn't like at first.
Okay.
I didn't like that until later. So it's just kind of weird. Like like I said, Shrek hasn't changed. I just changed. So there you go.
The films got smaller. Is that what you're trying to say?
I guess so. Yes.
Yeah.
I guess so.
We got smaller, actually. Okay, so another one of my favorite movies. All right, so Kyle said, how did you guys become film writers and podcasters? What are your backstories, and how did you meet? I saved this question for the very end because I knew this was something that people would be like, I don't care about this. Us talking about ourselves. So we're going to close out on this, but okay, so let's start with the how did you meet question. So I'll start with, because I think it was as basic as I followed you on Twitter, right?
Right.
Or did you follow me first? I think I followed you.
Probably, yeah, you probably followed me actually. Because if I remember correctly, I was writing for Heroic Hollywood at the time, and I wrote a list of the top Pixar, or I think I just ranked them. Mm-hmm. And I just wrote that. It was before Finding Dory was coming out. And I just wrote it, and I set it out there, and just was kind of doing my thing. And then you reached out to me. And do you want to go from there?
Yeah. Well, so at the time I was doing the predecessor to this podcast, I mentioned it earlier, actually, Now Conspiring. And I was looking to do just a couple of bonus episodes or versions of the main show where like I would bring on somebody and just talk about a film. And I think one of the reasons I reached out to you was because I had read your thing and I was like, oh, he's interesting. Like I'd like to talk to him about Pixar movies. Because the thing that stuck out to me was that we disagreed on Pixar. And I thought that would make for a great conversation, right? Which, voila, that's kind of the point. But the kind of the point of us meeting was our differences. And when we when we connected and stuff, like I think something that stuck out to me was that you had seen a couple of films that my co-host on Now Conspiring refused to watch that I wanted to talk about, like the BFG, I think it was. And later, I think Legend of Tarzan and stuff like that. 2016 was a rough summer. But
Wow.
so I invited you on to Now Conspiring, and then you and I talked about, I think it was BFG. It was the first film we talked about, unless I'm mistaken. And yeah, that's how we met. But I think like over time, like you kept coming on to Now Conspiring, so we had a blast, and you met the rest of the cast of that show, and the, you know, one thing led to another, and I was eventually I pitched Cinemaholics to you, and it's like that Garfield cartoon where, you know, I it's so hard to do this on an audio format, but it really sums this up. Maybe we should post it on the Facebook page, because literally me asking you to do a podcast was perfectly summed up in a comic strip of Garfield. Believe it or not.
2 panels of a 3-panel strip, I guess
there
I should mention.
Yeah. Where Garfield has no dialogue. Okay, so...
Well, he never has dialogue. He just has thought bubbles.
Okay, so... And then how did you guys become writers and podcasters? What are your backstories? What's your backstory, Wilashin?
Nothing really extravagant. I just was a big fan of film. I watched a lot as a kid. And then I think around middle school, I started writing about them for like the school paper. Same thing in high school, and then going into college. And then I just kind of started blogging or writing for different film publications throughout the years. And I just kind of tried to do my thing as much as I could. And I just kind of worked my way up. And I can't say I'm like a major success or anything. I just kind of do what I do. But yeah, I mean, I would say for anybody who's interested in writing about film, just do it. Like, I know it sounds like kind of cheesy and corny, but I mean, the best way you can do it is just getting it out there. And that might be through Letterboxd or Medium at this point, or even just setting up your own blog on WordPress or something. But I would just say, I mean, if you really want to write about film in any either professional or non-professional way, just do it. And if you're consistent and you have good opinions, or at least you're well informed in how you speak or just passionate about what you're doing, you can build an audience from there, and then there you go.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. So similarly, I was passionate about film, but I was really passionate with blogging. So I've mentioned this on the show a few times, but when I was in high school, I worked at a movie theater. I was a projectionist, and eventually I was like an assistant manager. And I really started to, I always really liked films. I always watched a lot of films because my mother in particular is a cinemaholic, I'm proud to say. And she's the person that I was always watching films with as a kid. She would always take me to films that I did not want to see. One of my favorite films of all time, A Knight's Tale, only was an experience for me in the theater because my mom made me see it. I was like 10 or 11, and I don't know why, but I just wasn't interested in it. But my mom, provided my first discovery moment of going into a film with very low expectations and walking out being totally blown away. And to this day, Knight's Tale is a comfort food for me as well. And in the same vein we talked about before. Yeah,
I was going to say, also, if you are serious about getting into film, just watch as many as you can, but also like watch films that you would think normally you'd never watch.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, even if you're like, oh, this isn't my thing, if you watch it and you're still like, yeah, it's not my thing, at least you tried it. Like, you can never know, though. You might like walk into Jane Austen adaptation and be like, this isn't my thing, and be like, oh, now I'm a big Jane Austen fan. You never know. You just got to try it.
And you're not really going to find success in this industry and personal success through talking and writing about film unless you start to really have, it's a skill. It's a skill to watch films you're not interested in. It's work, because like forcing yourself to engage with art, it sounds like the easiest thing in the world until it isn't. And it's the last thing you want to do.
It's not day labor or something, but it is more than you think, right? It's like, it's a mental strain to do something like that, and even like to watch like more than one film in a given day. I think we talked about this before.
Yeah,
that seems like the easiest thing, right? Like, you think you got it made, but that's a lot. That takes a lot out of you. Like, just sitting in a theater and watching 2 or 3 films, you'd be surprised.
Yeah, and I'd say that the reason I broke out in this industry was because I worked at a theater and I had to do that. I had to watch films because part of my job was figuring out which theaters to play movies in. It was a second run theater. So we knew how the box office was working for certain films. And so we had we would get the numbers. It was a Century theater. So we would get the numbers and we would look at, okay, we'd have to like make guesses. We'd have to watch trailers. We'd have to really engage and talk about films in our office. And it was so much fun. And I realized I love talking about films in this way. And I learned from just really like people who really love film and who love to sort of, figure out and predict like what people are going to like. So that's kind of how I got into this world of film and like the knowledge of it. And then like I started discovering the classic films. I started discovering, all of these things, a lot of it during college when I was taking like film courses and I was learning how films are made and doing things like that. And I did like a bunch of blogging. Like my first blog was a film blog. It was called Worth Watching. It doesn't exist anymore because I destroyed it, but
okay.
It came out. I was doing it in 2011. And then I did it for a year and then I stopped doing it because I just think I felt like I wasn't there yet. And I wanted to try other things. I wanted to do a music blog because I was like, maybe I like that more. So I did the music blog thing for like a couple of years. And that was the first blog I did that was pretty successful. Like it actually kind of picked up and it drew in a lot of people. I eventually stopped doing that though, because I wanted to do just one thing. And that's my website, johnnegroni.com, where I would talk about anything that I wanted. And my backstory was just that I would write about film all the time on that site. Because I was out of college and I was now filling my time with films and watching lots of newer films. And then eventually articles that I wrote on my site, started going viral. I started doing really film focused content. And then eventually I started getting pitched to do write-ups for other websites, started writing for Mashable and Huffington Post. And I realized that it was something that I really like to do was to contribute to all these sites. And that's my backstory. There's a lot more to it for you as well, but that's really all it was like the same thing as you. It's just, I just started a blog and I practiced and I did it. And I realized that I like doing it.
Right. I would say for anybody who's interested in this, just write every day if you can. It doesn't have to be like a full page or anything like, hours or thousands of words. It could even just be a paragraph a day. But if you're interested in doing it, do it at least once a day if you can. And you'll see growth. I guarantee you, if you do it every day, you'll see growth. And also, if you get a chance, take film classes, even if it's like a local community college or something like that, or something nearby. It doesn't have to be anything major, but you
can also do online courses. There are free ones that they're great supplements to that.
Yeah, I would say not only get a chance to watch films that may be out of your typical wheelhouse, but older films is a key. That's something I definitely need to do more, is watch older films, because if you see how films progress, you really kind of get a better understanding of what this medium is. So that's, I guess, the advice I have to give.
I couldn't agree more. I think people get a Letterboxd account. That's Letterboxd, letterboxd.com. Will and I are both on there. Yeah. And that's such an easy way to start small a little bit, not small in like a diminishing way, but start logging the films that you watch and write things down in them. Like that's where you can write reviews and you'll see growth there. Like people will start following you and coming to you for your takes.
Right. And also I forgot, read as much as you can. Read as much as you can about film.
So many great books about film out there.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is right over here. It's called Story by Robert McKee. I have it on my shelf.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It will teach you more about film than any podcast, anything Will and I ever could possibly say. I think that you get so much more out of that. I think film podcasts are great. There are a lot of great ones we can mention, and we obviously do our best here, but they're not film school. They don't even scratch the surface. They scratch like the air above the surface of like true film and what it means and the history of it. So if you're really passionate about this stuff and you want to just deepen it because of maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's because you want a job in this industry or something, that's where like reading is highly, highly recommended.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Okay, well, I think that'll put a pin on our 100th episode of Cinemaholics. Glad we had a chance to reflect a bit, answer some questions, and reveal some of our backstories. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Next week is complicated. So The Kid Who Would Be King comes out along with Serenity. Now, we already talked about Kid Who Would Be King on the last call, and Sundance is starting up. So the thing is, we're not totally sure what we're going to be able to watch and what in time. We have a few ideas for things that we could talk about, but we're going to be doing a patron poll to let you listeners decide what we're going to be discussing. It could be a new release. It could be something that just came out on Netflix or Hulu. It could be maybe an older film. It could be a film that you all suggest. It could be a film that we missed more recently that we could give the full featured review treatment. So we're gonna do a list, a poll together. But if you have a suggestion, you want to hear about a film that we haven't had a chance to discuss on the show, please write in at cinemahawkspodcast@gmail.com. And if you want us to do another 100 episodes, don't forget to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts /iTunes and Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you call your podcast home. And you can, as always, hang out with us on Facebook and Twitter. All of the links to everything I've said and more is in our show notes. And we're so excited for another 100 episodes. And season 3 is going to be starting up, I think, at the end of January. So it's coming. And
yeah, after Sundance, right?
I think so. I think that's like when it's going to really begin our season 3. And we have a lot of exciting stuff in store, a lot of fun plans for what the show is going to become, and ways that I think are a natural progression for how far we've come, I would say. But
right.
With that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Thanks as always for listening. From the Internet California, I am John O'Gurney.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
For Chris Evangelista from the Internet /film, we'll see you next time.